before Obama left office, he commissioned an intelligence report that basically said, I don't care what the evidence says, what the intelligence says. I want you to put together a report that says Donald Trump colluded with Russia in order to win the 2016 election.
Kiss Cam,
Coldplay. Yeah.
Man, we got some stuff to talk about on this Cultural Review Friday. Welcome to the Under God Podcast. My name is Nate. I'm here with Daniel. Daniel, what the heck, man? First of all, why are there still kiss cams? Those are so weird.
Yeah, so the kiss cam thing makes me think of every major league sporting event I've ever attended, which is like, what happens when they put the kiss cam on you, but you're with your sister, right? Like, what happens?
You better have
that's always like my thought is like, what happens if, and this past month, a couple weeks ago, we had a much worse incident than that even, which is that the kiss cam at a Coldplay concert caught the CEO of a tech company called Astronomer named Andy Byron on the kiss cam with his HR chief, which pretty sure that's an HR violation. I run HR for our church. It is. With Kristen Cabot.
I have to report a claim though. You've hugged me one too many times without.
I've hugged Nate too much, and
I didn't know.
You guys all saw it here, but it wasn't on Kiss Cam, so it's okay.
Yeah, right.
That's
Everyone saw it.
how it works.
Yeah. By the way, I know Chris Martin's a little woke, whatever, but like 2009, I went to a Coldplay concert in Atlanta. I do have to say, it was like probably the best concert I've ever been.
Really?
It was such a great experience. So much fun. You played
old.
Yellow, and I know you weren't even born yet in 2009. You're like 17 right now or whatever, however old you are. What would that make you?
In 2009,
I was 16.
2009, I was like 13.
That's a lie. You were like 3.
I was born in 96.
They were playing Yellow. They had like these beach balls that were like 4x this table right here that were yellow, and they were like partially filled with helium. And so they just like would float. It was this cool experience anyways. But there was no kiss cam that I recall at that concert, unlike the one that happened in Boston.
Yeah, which is it's funny because Steve Martin actually.
Chris Martin.
Yeah, Chris Martin, sorry.
Steve Martin.
Steve Martin's our pastor. Yeah, my brain. Chris Martin said at the time, he said, hey, they're either having an affair or they're very shy. It's what he said from the stage.
But have you heard that like it was a setup?
I have not heard that.
Okay, here's what who was the chick that was with them that was like laughing uncontrollably? I don't remember her name. But I read this story. I don't know why I read this. But I read this story that somehow like she was working with a bunch of people trying to like get the guy because the CEO, they knew that he was a cheater. He was also apparently hard to deal with. This is all according to the story. It could be totally fiction, but it makes for a good story. Apparently she like paid off a cameraman, had people in the audience that were like all like they were ready to like cue and tell the camera guy when to put it on them, and like she's like relaying information, and so that's why like she didn't look surprised. She was laughing because she finally got him and like was totally out to get him. I don't know.
That would have been funny. I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea.
Either way, homeboy's cuddled up.
Yeah,
with not his wife.
That's not too good.
At a Coldplay concert.
At a Coldplay concert. Yeah. So here's sort of the reason that I think this story matters, which is that one, there's been an actual reaction of like, hey, this shouldn't have happened, of public shame, which in our culture, to make things clear, this is what like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Huffington Post, they run articles all the time that are like, here's reasons why you need to enter like a polygamous relationship. Here's why you should leave your spouse. Like the mainstream media will run articles like this all the time in our culture. Our culture constantly
encouraging this.
Yeah, is crapping on the institution of marriage. Right. And then it was kind of funny to watch the reaction from this because everybody's knee-jerk reaction is, hey, that's bad, you shouldn't do it. Which I actually took as kind of a positive thing, not that they did it, but a positive thing that at least some
people reacted
was
negatively to this.
Hey, marriage matters and you shouldn't cheat on your wife at a Coldplay concert. Like that's a bad thing to do. Like I was not certain that as a country, we still had the moral clarity to be able to say, yes, that's a bad thing. You shouldn't do that. And it seems like we do. The good thing that comes out of this actually is that you look at a story like this and you look at, okay, hey, here's this guy sitting there cheating on his wife. And it actually does something for all of us, which reminds us that what sins we try and hide away in our own personal lives actually are never going to remain private, right? There's always going to be a public accounting. There's going to be a moment when you're going to have to stand before God. And even if that's not on this side of heaven, even if it's later, there's an accounting and like, hey, there's accountability for those things. And I think that's actually a good thing, is that people remember, hey, there are consequences to your actions, because so often we see all these crazy celebrity stories and all these things, and there's just no consequence to the action. But it is really sad. It's extremely sad that this man has chosen to cheat on his wife. He's chosen to cheat on her to the point where he's comfortable, like, going in public and doing it
with people
he works with. Like, that's not a good thing. But what is a good thing is that we're able to unabashedly condemn it, and that as a culture we're able to say, hey, this is not right. You need to live a better life than this. And my desire is actually that we get back to a place where, as a culture, when you have an affair, when you have like some kind of marital discrepancy where you cheat in some way or another, that we publicly shame that. And we're like, no, that's not acceptable, because I think marriages would do better if we got rid of this no-fault divorce mindset that just like, oh, it doesn't matter, your marriage is just a legal contract. No, your marriage is a covenant made before God. It's important, it matters, and you need to honor that. And as communities, we're going to make sure that the other people in the community enforce that honor.
Yeah, pretty wild. So public fall is never fun. I do think it should remind us of Proverbs 10:9, that whoever walks in integrity walks securely. He who makes his ways crooked will be found out, right? So a lot of people were like complaining that it was an invasion of his privacy and no one should have shown that, like, whether or not the story I read was true or not. Like, you're in a public place.
Yeah,
you have no expectation of privacy. It'd be different if he was behind closed doors in an apartment or a hotel and someone snuck a camera in there and secretly recorded something that was intended to be in secret. But here you go. Like, I mean, you're out in public doing this stuff, and you have no expectation of privacy. It's out there. For me, I just look at that and go, the only person you're going to see me cuddled up to is the woman I'm married to. And catch me anytime you want.
Like, that's right. Like, I have no like fear that I'm going to be caught in public with another woman, because I'm never going to be in public with another woman. Like that's a statement that you should hold to. Anyway, but here's the thing about this story too, is honestly, it's extremely tragic that he has made these choices. It's his own fault that he's made these choices in his life. I pray that he finds redemption, and that kind of leads us into the next story that we're going to talk about today, which is the death of wrestling legend Hulk Hogan. So for those of you that don't know who Hulk Hogan is, because you're somehow even younger than me, Hulk Hogan is
somehow you can't read or write that if you're younger.
That's a hey, come on. I have 4 kids. I'm not that young. Is an icon, wrestling icon. Really started his career in the 1980s. And he passed away this week.
I grew up with him.
Yeah. You did grow up with him. Yeah, I'm sure. Well, I grew up in the shadow of him, right? So Hulk Hogan is this, like, he's the guy that made the WWE. Back then it was WWF, but he's the guy that came on the scene. He started tearing his t-shirt and ripping his muscles. He had the yellow bandana. And he made this, like, iconic cultural sensation. And he had this catchphrase, like, what you gonna do, brother? Like, he was this TV icon. He's in the same time that, like, a lot of the other sort of 1980s major cultural icons are on the scene. You know, you have all the rock star bands and all this happening. And he's one of those people in kind of that cultural American moment. But despite all of his fame, Hogan has a very controversial life in the public square, like many celebrities do. He's got this, like, sex tape that gets leaked out, and that's not great, right? This private sex tape that gets leaked out. They accuse him of being a racist. I don't really know anything about that. I don't know where I'm not really that worried about that, because it doesn't look like he actually was. It looked like that was more of an accusation. But he's very promiscuous. He has drug problems. He has all the things that a lot of times celebrities often carry with them. The cool part of Hulk Hogan's story isn't the cultural icon thing to me, because that is cool, and he helped define an American moment, and he's one of these, great American iconic figures. He paved the way for, like, The Rock and, like, Stone Cold Steve Austin, like all these people that are cool and everyone's seen in your movies, right? He's the one that made all of that possible. So he did help shape American culture. He's like this very masculine figure, and I wish we had more masculine figures like that. But the bigger part of Hulk Hogan's story is that after the drugs and after the affairs and after all this stuff, almost 2 years ago, Hulk Hogan decided to make Jesus Christ his Lord and Savior. And at a small Baptist church in Indiana, he goes and he gets baptized, and he comes out of the water and he just says, I'm changed forever. And he visibly, tangibly turns his life around. And what Hulk Hogan does is he goes out and he starts telling basically anybody that would give him an audience over the next almost 2 years, until he just passed away this past week. the work that Jesus Christ had done in his life. And so anytime he's put in front of a microphone, he's like, I want everyone to know Jesus Christ saved me. I was dead in my sin. Remember, great American icon, has everything that the world promises, fame, fortune.
Yeah, and it left him empty.
And he's saying, Jesus is the one that saved me. And I think that that's important because so often we forget that there's room for redemption. And as Christians, if we condemn people without remembering that there's room for restoration and redemption, right? We're passing them on a death sentence.
Yeah.
That Christ says, no, I can still pay the penalty for their sin. So we want to call those people out into repentance and not just say, hey, you're dead in your sins, and then not tell them the other part of the story, which is that Jesus can save you. And I think that this is one of the coolest stories that we've seen in a long time. In the public sphere, someone coming out genuinely living out their faith. He was towards the end of his life when he got saved. But God still counted him as one of his children by the time he
it's never too late until it is. So interesting thing about like celebrity deaths, they always say like comes in threes. You know, and maybe it comes in three or more, but like just a few iconic people from my childhood have all passed away like in the last week. Which was Hulk Hogan, Ozzy Osbourne, who like I never listened to his stuff. Like I grew up in a Christian home and he's like biting the heads off of birds and stuff and drinking their blood and like calling himself Prince of Darkness. And people are like, yeah, you got saved. I have no idea. It's between him and Jesus. But then also Ryan Sandberg, who was a great Chicago Cubs Major League Baseball player when I was a kid, pre-strike. I don't even know if you know about the Major League Baseball strike, Daniel. That was like, so you're still a twinkle in your daddy's eye before that happened. But yeah, Major League Baseball, like when I was a kid, I used to come home and watch baseball in the afternoons. I couldn't watch night games because I had to go to bed early. But the afternoon games I would watch. And of course, WGN was like a Chicago station. So I'd always watch Chicago baseball. And it was sort of like a little bit of a Cubs fan, a little bit of a Braves fan. And then once the strike happened, I gave up on Major League Baseball. I decided they were all babies. They all made enough money. And just kind of quit paying attention. But Ryan Sandberg also passed away. And I will say Ryan Sandberg, even in his late in life, like he was a strong professing believer, battling cancer. And even just last year, they unveiled a statue for him at Wrigley Field. And he was out there talking about, you know, I would have none of this without my faith, without my family, without my friends. He's, you know, giving praise to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, you know. And so that was very touching, you know, just for me to see. But it's kind of weird, man, being in an age where like three people that were massive superstars, you know, when I was a kid are now dying, one of Parkinson's, one of cancer, and one of a heart attack.
So, well, I think what's cool about seeing the celebrities who are professing Christians is that this is coming back into our culture. I've seen this shift. It used to be, it was super shunned, right? And like you were an outlier if you were the one who gave God glory and credit.
Yeah, just think about how they treated Tebow just a few years ago.
Exactly.
Like, I'm pretty much blackballed him because he put John 3:16 on his.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a complete, hey, no, you're not allowed to do that. And now you see it all the time where people who are coming to faith in Christ in the public sphere and they're dedicating their lives, and not to say that all those people are perfect or any of those things, but you're starting to see this become not only normal but accepted and even hopefully celebrated. When I saw that Hulk Hogan had died, I sometimes get to write for different political outlets, and I texted the editor, who's a friend of mine at Human Events Daily, and I said, hey, I want to write this piece on Hulk Hogan, but all I want it to be is a gospel presentation because I think that that's the most honoring thing, because that's what I think he would have wanted. And his immediate response was, yes, do it. Like it wasn't like, hey, let me think about that. That's a little edgy. It was like, now they're a conservative publication and he's a Christian guy. But even a few years ago, you know, the major conservative outlets would have been like, whoa, you know, we need to think about it before we let you just do a gospel presentation. And you can literally go on their site right now and it's up there and it's like, hey, let's talk about how Hulk Hogan's story can be your story because he was far from God and you are too, and you can find redemption in Christ.
No, it's great. We'll link to that article in the podcast notes, and we'll put that on YouTube. So everyone should go and just check the comments or maybe the description, and we'll put that in there so that people can read it. I think some of this, you're seeing this, I think it's a little bit of a pushback because after COVID, I mean, the Christians felt so persecuted when they're being told they can't go to church, they can't worship together. Yeah. And honestly, like that happened even under Donald Trump. Like that was, you know, people like to tout Trump for his COVID handling. Like that was, to me, those are the worst things that he did, like getting forced vaccines coming and, you know, warp speed. And I'm like, stop bragging about that. And then of course, like he didn't he didn't do anything about states shutting down churches. I mean, we had to here in Texas, like our governor had to like shut that crap down that he was allowing to happen because of the influence of Fauci and others. Anyway, I digress. But we had that happen, and then we come right on the heels of that. We get the Biden administration, and people don't realize it, but like in the name of tolerance of trans people. And we saw massive persecution against people that had Christian worldview. I mean, people in my church that lost their jobs because they spoke out and said, like, I'm not comfortable with you letting a dude go to my bathroom as a female, and they get fired. Yeah. So you see a lot of that stuff happening. But now I agree with you. I think a lot of the pushback, even the Trump election, it's not that Trump's like super Christian. We definitely don't think he's Jesus, or even that everything he does is right. Like, I could critique him if you want to, but what we did, I really did believe. And one of the things that I think is making this current administration one of the best in modern time is that he is returning religious freedoms. Yeah. So I know we got a few other things we want to talk about, but let's jump to that.
Yeah. Let's
talk about this new federal policy that increases religious expression at work. You know a little more about it than me, but I'm super excited to hear about it.
Yeah. So this is one of the more underreported stories that I saw earlier this week that I wanted to draw some attention to. So one of the things that's happened as the Trump administration has come in, and the way that it works is they're allowed to rewrite federal policy guidelines. And basically, up until now, in the federal workplace, there's been a ban on people expressing their Christian faith in the workplace, basically whole stop. And so a few months ago, the Trump administration said, hey, we are going to open up an investigation and look into the ways that we believe Christians are being persecuted actively. And we are going to put a stop to all of that because we believe that there's a religious persecution happening from the federal government, and we are going to deal with all of that. And that's in the light, by the way, of like the last administration, Merrick Garland having hey, we're going to go look and prosecute the Catholics. We're going to go look at the school board meetings and try and find them and target them as extremists. That was all happening.
Yeah. Parents taking at school board meetings, getting arrested.
And put on watch lists. All of these things are happening. And so the Trump administration comes in and they said, hey, we are going to put together a task force to end this religious discrimination. And one of the things that they just came to the conclusion of is, hey, it's actually not right, ethical, or constitutional for us to have put so many restrictions on Christians in the workplace. So this is in regards to the federal employees, right? So every federal employee across the country up until now has been banned from openly expressing and discussing their religious beliefs in the workplace. The Trump administration has come in and they've said that is no longer the case. You are free to express yourself. You're free to have like Bibles on your desks. You're free to, which is a thing that they used to say you can't do. You can't have a Bible on your desk because you're
proselytizing.
Right, exactly. And so this is a significant shift towards religious freedom because basically the federal government had taken this church and state lie that we've talked about extensively on the show before, and they've said, hey, you're actually not even allowed to be a Christian and be working for the federal government. That's how restrictive it has been. And now they're saying, actually, you're free to do all of those things. It's your fundamental right as an American to live your life as a Christian.
Yeah, I think this is a great outflow of Trump's faith office actually being a real thing. So somebody was asking me, like super liberal person, like, you can't name one good thing that Donald Trump has done since he took office in January. I'm like, okay, I can name a lot more than one, but the one I actually named,
time you have,
but the one I named for me, honestly, was that he had bolstered the faith office. Now, George W. Bush is the one who started the faith office in modern era, and basically they were there to like, give a voice and ear, wisdom about what the faith community, which is super broad, especially the way Bush and Obama had it too. But, he like brought in the freaking Muslim Brotherhood under the faith office and like, totally different thing. So now Trump comes in,
not busy like
Trump comes in and very Trumpian. He brings in like a super controversial figure, Paul White. I say controversial, like in the Christian scene, she's very controversial, divorces, prosperity gospel, whatever, all this stuff. Even people just freak out over. I don't actually know her, so I have nothing to say about her. I did get an opportunity to meet her son. Seemed like a great dude, in Washington a few weeks back. But here's what I'll say: irrespective of whether Paul White is or shouldn't be a pastor, I have no idea. I'm not going to comment on that. I'm just naming that there's a thing out there that people don't like her. But what she did, she's come in and done a fantastic job. But what Trump did was essentially, it's unofficial, but essentially and functionally made her a cabinet level position. Yeah. And so now she's in all the meetings. And then not only that, but he directed that any new federal policies that roll out to any other departments have to first roll through her department to make sure that religious freedoms are being protected and aren't being affected by any new policies. And so as they began to make changes in policy shifts from Department of Education, Department of Health, Department of Agriculture, all this stuff. All of it has to flow through her office. She had to sign off that it was not going to inhibit any, kind of religious expression in an unconstitutional way, and then it wasn't going to oppress anything really. And in that process, they began to discover that a lot of the policies that were in place had things like that built into it. And so this is sort of like a blank, okay, instead of just checking every new policy, we're also going to go back and change some of the old ones. So I think that's pretty cool for my money, for my vote. That's one of the best things that Trump has done, is to bring that kind of influence into the entire federal government.
Yeah, I would love it to see if over the next several years it becomes normalized for people to just live out their faith, right? Because what I really think in the culture has happened, and in the government, especially if you're in a government environment, is it's become normalized that you're not allowed to live out your faith. This is paving the way. And it's also just, hey, if your excuse so far has been, well, I'm not allowed to talk about Jesus at work, well, that excuse is gone. So like live boldly, Christian, right? Like that's what we're told in scripture. So
yeah, and by the way, he also this was 3 weeks ago, the IRS rewrote basically their policy as it relates to enforcement of the Johnson Amendment. They essentially fully decriminalized, endorsing political candidates. I actually was interviewed by Texas Monthly 2 weeks ago on this topic, and
make sure we put that in there
and talked about it a little bit as well. And one of the things about it, and I think this has happened. The reason I'm bringing this up, because I think this has happened in the federal government. It certainly has happened in the military, where there is like the real thing. So there is real policies that shut people down, but then there's also like the threat. And, one of the reasons I'm so glad that they have decriminalized the Johnson Amendment, although they need to just get rid of it altogether, is that a lot of pastors would self-censor because of that. Yeah. And it's like, well, I'm scared of what's going to be said. I even said in the article, like, we had some candidates that ran for city council out of our church. And I did ask our church, this was back in May, so before this happened, I asked our church, hey, pray for these people. And you got to vote your conscience, but I think they're worthy of your vote. They're part of our family, but I think even me, as I think back, like had the Johnson Amendment not been in place, I would have just said straight up, like, you got to vote for them. Like, if you're going to vote your Christian conscience, this is your vote. Yeah. And I wasn't that direct. I kind of gave them a little out, like, vote your conscience, but they're worthy of your vote. And I think even in that, I found myself in retro, like going, I wish I was even a little bit stronger on that than I was. And I probably was that way because I was already getting targeted and getting letters and all this crap, for political support. But I'm glad to see that's decriminalized at this point as well. It's kind of related to this. So anyway, what else are we going to talk about?
I mean, that's we're next headline. Anyway, we could go on and on and on and on. Yeah. We have lots of episodes that dive into that. So another thing I want to talk about, we'll talk about the Obama thing, and then we'll talk about Gaza, and those will be our last two headlines we talk about today. So this past week we had a major headline, which is that the DNI, who's the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, went on live television, and she basically dumped over 100 pages of documents, and she dumped all sorts of information regarding the original Russia collusion investigation that happened under Trump's first term. And so essentially, here's what's happened, and this is really high level, but I want to talk about why it matters too, and why as Christians we actually should care about this story a lot, which is that all of the evidence that she has now put forward has made it extremely clear that before Obama left office, he commissioned an intelligence report that basically said, I don't care what the evidence says, what the intelligence says. I want you to put together a report that says Donald Trump colluded with Russia in order to win the 2016 election. Now, for those of you who remember, like just a few years ago, that dominated the news cycle for 4 years.
Every time you turned it on, it's Russia.
Russia was all of Trump's first term. It was the central thing. And by the way, I think if he had rolled straight into a second term, it would still be like dominating the news cycle today, right? I really think that. I think that this story took up more airwaves than basically any other news story in my adult life, which, you said isn't that long, but still.
It was 5 minutes.
Like 5 minutes,
it's still
whatever.
big.
It's dominated because for years they beat the dead horse. They had the Mueller investigation. They had all these things. And all they kept saying was, you'd have guys like Adam Schiff go on TV and he would say, I have secret information that Donald Trump really colluded with Russia. And you listen to this and it was nonstop for 4 years. And so
how many intelligence officers signed off on it?
Like 60 or something? A lot of different people. And basically what she came out and she said, hey, we know for a fact that all of this was basically scripted from the start, commissioned by Obama in order to find something, in order to sow division in the American public with the new administration that's incoming before Obama left the White House, that the John Brennan, the director of the CIA, James Comey, the director of the FBI, they knew about it, were in on some of these transmissions. And by the way, like, as all of this is going to play out, it used as its predicate what was called the Steele dossier, which was a piece of information that had been paid for and put together by the Hillary Clinton campaign. Now, we suspected a lot of that for a long time as conservatives, and we're called crazy for it.
Laughing because it's outrageous. Like, it's so outrageous, and people bought it and sold it, and like
sold it over and over and over and over and over again. And they basically came out and they said, hey, this is all based on a lie, and everything that we spent Trump's entire first term, dealing with,
fighting against,
was a complete lie.
Yeah.
And here's why I think that that's key to point out, which is that there is a difference in having a good leader and having a bad leader. And leaders aren't necessarily perfect, but when your leaders actively conspire to deceive and manipulate you for the coming future, when all that they care about is their legacy, because this is the way that I basically read this, and I think Obama is bitter that his legacy is being taken because he's viewing Trump's election as a rejection of his policies, which he openly said basically at the time, and he did. And it was a rejection of Obama's policies, by the way, so he's not wrong to read it that way. But he's bitter about that. And so because of that, he hated the American people so much that he set up this story that's going to spend the next 4 years dominating our news cycles and our lives and confusing a bunch of people, and the investigation's getting complicated and everything's behind closed doors. And that level of deception is just not what we should expect from our government. And
what do we do about it?
What do we do about it?
It feels pretty treasonous.
Yeah.
I mean,
again, I put a piece in Daily Wire this week that said we should prosecute these people because I think that there should be a level of accountability. Now, Obama is different because he's the commander-in-chief, and so he has a level of immunity that nobody else has other than presidents. But John Brennan doesn't have that. Hillary Clinton doesn't have that. A lot of these people, James Comey doesn't have that. A lot of these people that signed off on these things knew in advance that what they were doing was illegal under several different statutes. And I think there should be prosecutions from those things because the American people and people in general, they cry out at a certain point because they recognize that there's an injustice from the people that govern them. This story is like an apex of that. Hey,
right.
We can do whatever we want. We can ruin people's lives. We can go after our political opponents. We can spend years and years and years dominating the news cycle. And even when we're caught red-handed, we're going to get away with it. I think we can't get away with it. I think that there's a level of biblical justice that has to happen here that just says, hey, it's not vengeance. It's not that we want to get in a banana republic cycle where we go back and forth between, hey, whoever the next president is prosecutes the previous president. I don't want that. I don't want any of that. But what I do think is that there needs to be some faith restored in the eyes of the American public that just says, if you get caught with your pants down, like screwing the American people, which, by the way, to the tunes of millions and millions and millions of dollars for this investigation, and to even more social fabric costs than is calculable, then you should have to face some consequences for that. Or what we're going to end up in is back to a situation where all of these people who act as bureaucrats in whatever roles that they're in, they feel licensed to do it again, however many times they want.
Right. So something's got to be done.
Yeah.
And that's pretty wild. There's a couple of the things we could talk about today, but one of those I think we should talk about is the humanitarian crisis going on in Gaza, and specifically a couple of things. First of all, I don't know that anybody really knows what's going on in Gaza that's not there. I mean, that's my opinion. But Gaza's health ministry, otherwise known as Hamas.
Yeah, Hamas. Yeah, that's important to understand.
Yeah, gives a lot of information, and they give it to the UN, and they give it to reporters for the New York Times, but it's literally the terrorist organization that is holding that country hostage that's getting
the numbers that they come in, they give all these crazy numbers, and they're always inaccurate on the later side. But their health ministry is reporting that there's like 60,000 deaths and all these things. The numbers that you see in the news are largely just taken from Gaza's health ministry.
Right.
And so the reason that that's a problem is, like you said, it's from Hamas, right? And so Hamas comes in and they say, hey, here's exactly what's happening. Yeah. And then you find out on the backside that some of this isn't happening. The thing that I do know is happening in Gaza right now is that there's a food shortage of some kind to some level. But what I also know is you can speak directly to the people who call what's called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation have been delivering millions and millions of meals. And when I say that, I mean like yesterday they hit like 96 million meals. Today they'll be at like 97, almost 98.
Pretty remarkable.
Million meals to the people in Gaza. And the reason that that's important to understand is that at the same time, they're accusing the left, and the pro-Hamas side is accusing Israel of basically withholding aid. And no, Israel is facilitating all of the aid for Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. It's the UN who's not taking trucks in, right? And the reason the UN isn't doing that is because, again, the UN has been partnered with Hamas for a long time through all sorts of different different organizations and channels and all these things. And so they haven't been delivering the aid. The reason that Hamas is rejecting the aid is that Hamas wants the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation to stop delivering aid because they can't steal it from them, because the IDF goes in and makes sure that it gets delivered where it needs to go. What they can do with the UN aid is they can go in and they can steal it. And what they were doing up until Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was able to go in and work was they were taking the aid from the UN, which is what they want to be able to do again, and they're selling it to
they steal it and they sell it in the markets.
Yeah, that's right.
So they're exorbitant
prices,
but they're the ones making the money off of it.
Yeah.
What I think is pretty wild is just how much anti-Semitism is wrapped up in all of these efforts. So all of this is being done to try to portray, the Jewish people in the state of Israel as just absolutely evil. And here's the deal. There is not a single government, country, military in the world in modern times, possibly ever, who has tried to feed and care for the people in the enemy country that just attacked them and still has hostages in their country. So you're seeing all this stuff where it's like
there's still hostages.
People never active hostages.
People never call on Hamas to like release the hostages. They'll say, "Hey,
never.
Why doesn't Israel feed these people?" Meanwhile, they're facilitating.
And by the way, but like they're also not pressuring Egypt, who shares a border with Gaza, and actually Rafah is on the border of Egypt. So when everything goes down in Rafah, and I know there was some, I don't support every single thing that Israel does.
No, not you.
There were some bombs dropped in Rafah that were very questionable, but at the same time, the Egyptians could have easily opened their border and let people come in and escape. They could be pushing food back into Gaza. No one talks about that. No one talks about all the people that could be helped by Egypt. They just talk about the people that should be helped, by Israel. Meanwhile, Israelis are still being held hostage in tunnels in Gaza. It's crazy. And then we see like the New York Times with the fake skeleton child, which is so bad, so bad. So if you don't know the story, you're living under a rock if you don't know. But there was a picture that was put out in the New York Times of an extremely like malnourished looking child.
It's horrible.
It's like when I saw that, I was like, I honestly I thought it was AI. Like I started searching like, is this even real? Because it looks so bad. Like it's hard to imagine that it was real. And but it was real. But also being held by a mom who's clearly not malnourished with a little brother standing in the background who's clearly not malnourished. And I started like, people were sending this to me, like people that hate Israel that constantly bombard my inbox. Like, look at this. This is what Israel does. This is what you stand for. You call yourself a Christian. You support this, blah, 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 all this stuff. And so I'm trying to figure out what it is before I even respond. Like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. Well, it turns out like the kid has a massive like disease. I believe it's MS or multiple sclerosis.
I don't know his exact disease, but he has a disease that prevents him from being able to essentially eat effectively and maintain nutrition and all these things. And he's had this since before the war even started.
Before the war, I'm sorry, I don't have the exact details on what it is, but to your point, like he has a disease that is horrific. By the way, like Israel flew him out of there to another country to get treatment for his disease. Like Israel paid to send him to another country to get treatment. And the New York Times posts this as this is the result of Israel starving out people in Gaza. And then like part of me doesn't blame people if they just look at the news and read the news. Even President Trump, like I wish I could call him this morning and be like, hey dude, why did you say that? He's on the air yesterday going like, yeah, of course there's a big problem in Gaza. You can't make up those pictures. I'm like, is anybody briefing you on what pictures are showing you? Because the pictures are showing, and there's tons of there is tons of curated propaganda. Like you can go online and find videos of the same people that are allegedly dead in photographs later, like shooting videos and getting makeup put on and getting fake blood put on their shirts and all this stuff to like shoot another video. And you watch like where the behind the scenes footage where these people in Gaza, they're actually like tormenting kids and feeding them sand and making little babies eat sand. Like, Daniel, when I see that stuff, I'm 46 years old. It makes me want to see if the army will take me so I can go help. Like, it makes me crazy to watch them. They're tormenting their kids, and then when kids do have real issues, like this one that we talked about, the quote unquote skeleton child, they're exploiting a kid with a disease just to try to blame Israel for something that they're not even doing. It's mind numbing. So, anyways, here's what.
And they're rejecting ceasefire agreements, and they're
rejecting ceasefire agreements. All of it.
All of that is true, and I think that what you're talking about with the people that are here locally. I just want to hit on that because it's really important. A lot of people who, like our neighbors to you and I, are getting deceived by a lot of this stuff that's getting put out. And it's not that you and I are like, hey, the government of the state of Israel can never make a mistake. I don't believe that. I don't even believe like that. I don't believe that about my government. I don't believe that about any government, right? I've never believed that about any government. I don't believe that about ancient Israel. In fact, the Bible doesn't say that about ancient Israel, right? What I believe, though, is that the amount of PR that's been waged specifically against them has been untold. Like I've never seen anything like this, and they're losing the hearts and minds of a lot of people just because of that PR battle that like all of the mainstream outlets have just decided that they're the bad guys. And they haven't even stopped to ask the basic questions like, hey, what about the hostages? Hey, what about the 1,600 people that were murdered on the day of the event? Hey, what are you calling for? Are you calling for Hamas to be put back in power so that they can commit more atrocities? Hey, by the way, did you know that the people of Gaza were having their food stolen by Hamas and being oppressed by Hamas even before this war kicked off in October? Like, all of those things exist. All of those questions exist. But all people are bombarded with is, do you see this picture of a starving kid? Do you see this? Do you see this? Do you see this? And I just think that's a horrible lens to view this conflict through, because you're not even getting the opportunity to get the whole story.
So you're getting something that's totally dishonest.
So not accurate at all.
Yeah. So anyway, our goal here is basically like, I want you guys to do the research. Like when you see a picture, know that they're trying to sell you something. Like and do your homework to go look behind the scenes and maybe like spare some of your commentary until you fully grasp what's going on to the extent possible. And again, I would say because of the fact that most information coming out of Gaza is coming from Hamas, that's being reported to reporters who then report it to the UN, who then go and just run with it they just run with it, and then it ends up on the New York Times, and it ends up in the mouth of somebody at the UN, and then it sounds very legitimate until 2 weeks later, the wheels fall.
And the retraction always gets to 1/10 of 1/100th.
Yeah, and by the way, the New York Times has retracted this. Yeah, they've corrected it, but you're not going to hear that on CNN or wherever else. So you got to pay attention to this kind of stuff. But anyway, speaking of deception, we have a couple of episodes that I know you're not going to want to miss next week. So Joe Rogan recently had Representative James Tallarico, is a state rep out of Texas, on his program, who just grossly misrepresented biblical Christianity on his show. And so we're gonna do a couple episodes actually going through that Joe Rogan episode. So if you haven't listened to it, go listen to it. We'll promote the Joe Rogan podcast. Go listen to the whole thing, and then come back and listen to the Under God podcast next week as we walk through, refute some of the claims, and help straighten out some of the lies that were told by Representative James Tallarico. You're not going to want to miss that. We'll see you next week on the Under God podcast.
Can't wait to be back. Thank you for joining us today on the Under God podcast. If this episode encouraged you, share it with a friend or family member. Your support helps us reach more people with God's Word. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and at undergodpodcast.com so that you never miss an episode. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, X, True Social, and TikTok for more content, behind-the-scenes moments, and faith-filled encouragement throughout the week. We want to hear from you. Leave a comment, join the conversation, and send us your questions. We will be answering them in upcoming Q&A episodes. Until next time, remember to think biblically about the things that matter most.